Really interesting fight coming up at 125 pounds with the UFC debut of the Brick, Jimmy Flick, taking on Cody Durden and Matt. Cody Durden debuted back earlier on this year on very short notice, replacing Luke Sanders, taking on now a former common opponent between these two guys in Chris Gutierrez, up a weight class at 135 pounds. Now, for Cody Durden, he had spent a large majority of his career at bantamweight. Now, I know if you go through his record on Tapology, there's a lot of catchweight fights peppered in there between 127 and 130 pounds. A little bit of a head scratcher, kind of worrisome. And Cody Durden, so far throughout his career, has had one fight at flyweight. He lost that fight at flyweight. That is one of his two losses in his career. But for what it's worth, in Cody Durden's UFC debut, performed admirably there. Earned a draw against Chris Gutierrez, who was coming off of a wild win. Leg kick TKO. So he goes into the fight against Durden, and it was a weird one because for Gutierrez, you're originally going to be taking on Luke Sanders. What's Luke Sanders other than a glass cannon? He's a bit of a jack of all trades. He can do a lot of things very well. I don't know if Gutierrez kind of underestimated the short notice opponent in Durden, but he lost that first round handily. All three judges scored it a 10-8 for Cody Durden. All three judges scored the remaining two rounds 10-9s for Gutierrez. Overall, a draw. So for Durden, he looked great. For Gutierrez, bit of a head scratcher. So for Durden moving forward, we know him as a wrestler. We know him as that classic wrestle boxer, a guy that's going to kind of crash forward, look for the takedown, look for top control, smash that ground and pound. If he can get a submission, kudos to him. He's a guy that trains at an American Top Team, Atlanta. Now, I know on some sites they have him as ATT and then they list the training partners as the Amanda Nunes's, the Dustin Poirier's of the world. He's an ATT Atlanta guy. Who trains out of ATT Atlanta? Well, the Lima brothers. You've got Rafael Assunção, you've got Ill Will Brooks, former Bellator champ. There are a lot of good fighters there, but you have to make the distinction between the two. For Jimmy Flick coming in here, making his UFC debut, this is a guy that has so many wins by submission. It's kind of a bit of a head scratcher when you look at his record. And you talk about some of the losses that he has so far in his career. UFC caliber fighters. Ray Rodriguez, his last loss. Before that, Chris Gutierrez. And we can go down through the list. Levi Mowles, another one of those losses. But those are all pretty high-level opponents. Now, the wins, maybe not the highest caliber, but when you look at a guy's record, being a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt, having 13 of 15 pro wins by submission, very, very, important, especially going into a fight like this, because as far as styles, and styles always make fights, this makes for a very interesting fight. I would almost consider it like a B grade when you compare this to Nate Landwehr and Movsar Evloev. Yeah, but this is still a really good fight. I'm really looking forward to it. I don't know if both guys stick at 25, if this is maybe a one-off. That remains to be seen. But I'm really looking forward to this one.
So am I. Now, hashtag flyweight never die. It is always nice seeing the UFC bring in more flyweight talent or just have more guys in the flyweight division because you know that, well, for the 13 fighters there, they need new opponents at a certain point, and I do think both guys will be compelling matchups for some of the other guys in the division if they do choose to stay down at 125. This fight is kind of odd, though, because I can see it going two completely different ways. We're either going to get a really fun scramble fest between these two guys, or it's going to be one of those Kamaru Usman, Colby Covington fights where it's okay, we're both so good at grappling that it's going to force the stand-up out of the two of us. Now, for Cody Durden, he is definitely the more powerful out of these two guys. On the feet, Jimmy Flick will give you a lot of different looks. He's not afraid to throw the calf kick. He's not afraid to go to the body with his kicks either. The thing about him, though, and especially the fact that Cody Durden is such a good wrestler, I'm a little worried that if Flick does get a little carried away with some of those kicks, Durden could catch them, and then that just makes the takedown attempt so much easier for him. And once this fight hits the mat, that's where the real fun starts, because Flick, when you say 13 of his 15 wins have come by submission, that's not even doing it justice. It's not like he's just getting arm bars or he's just getting chokes. You look at this man's record, anaconda submissions, Darce chokes, rear naked chokes. He really doesn't discriminate, and he is a threat no matter where the fight takes place on the mat. And for Cody Durden, his fight against Gutierrez, I like that we saw just a little bit of everything from him. We saw how good his grappling can be when he's on the offensive. We saw some of the holes in his striking game. We did see his cardio start to fade. But again, Chris Gutierrez is a very good UFC caliber fighter. So having a draw with a guy like that, there's no shame in that. But I do like that we just saw a lot of Cody Durden in that fight. Durden on top is going to be a huge threat for Flick. And Flick can't get into that, and we talk about this all the time. He can't get into that Louis Smolka where he's on his back. He is the comfortable grappler off his back, trying to go for submissions that he's not getting because Cody Durden will rain down ground and pound on him, and it is hellacious. Now, the thing about Cody Durden, he creates a lot of space, and that can open some submission threats for Jimmy Flick off of his back. So I do think that this could be one of those, Cody Durden getting a lot of takedowns throughout the fight, and then Flick potentially getting the submission as the fight goes on. But it's just that this fight and these two athletes match up so well together that I don't really care where the fight takes place because it should be exciting no matter what.
Jimmy Flick gets hit. And it's not to say that Cody Durden doesn't, but if you go back and watch that fight against Ray Rodriguez, they exchange. Rodriguez, a much better striker. Now, I know his short notice UFC debut didn't go very well for Ray Rodriguez. It went the way of Jimmy Flick against Ray Rodriguez. But in that one, they get into a clinch position, or if they even got in close, Rodriguez would start popping up with the knees, hit Flick hard, followed it up, finished him in that one. Now, Flick obviously on a win streak since then, really tied things together. In 2020, he became the freestyle cage fighting flyweight champion. It's hard to say without laughing. That's a silly name for an organization. He also became the LFA Flyweight Champ for what that's worth. And he came in on short notice replacing JP Buys to take on Nate Smith on Dana White's Contender Series Week 5 this year, earned a contract, and now he gets to face off against Cody Durden. Like I said, Durden, the one fight at flyweight, all those weird catchweight bouts, so maybe the weight cut could be an issue. I know weighed in at a healthy 135.5, again, that on short notice, taking on Gutierrez. And I remember watching back that prediction video to try and get a little bit more intel on Cody Durden. The fact that at that time, we weren't sure if that fight was going to take place at 35 or 45. So a lot of question marks around this fight. You look at it, and I mean, we talk about Cody Durden. He can crash forward. It's kind of a similar game plan to a lot of those wrestle boxers. We got another one on this card, like a Justin James. He can always rely on his wrestling. He doesn't. He's more than capable of brawling. Cody Durden can do that as well. Went 2 of 13 of his overall takedown attempts against Chris Gutierrez. But again, Gutierrez is a pretty good fighter, has a win over Flick like we had said. If we have a look at the odds for this fight, Matt, I was a little bit surprised. Flick opened a minus 222 average on best fight odds. He's now minus 177 for Durden. Opened up a plus 183. He's now at a plus 146. If we have a look at the Tapology votes, limited sample size, but at a 677 total votes, 82% going Flick, 70% going Flick by submission. That's the sexy pick. I mean, that's kind of been the story of his career. What's your take on this one overall?
So I really do think this fight comes down to cardio more than anything else. Because with Cody Durden, you see at the start of a fight, if he is able to get it to the ground, he is a big guy, especially for this weight class, and he's extremely explosive. And if he's able to get the back of Jimmy Flick, I don't care how good of a grappler Jimmy Flick is, just the added physicality of Cody Durden is going to give him problems throughout this fight. As the fight progresses, though, I do see Jimmy Flick kind of fighting his way back into it. And here's the really important thing, too. If Cody Durden gets the takedown, Jimmy Flick isn't completely out of the fight. If Jimmy Flick is able to get on top of Cody Durden, that's by far the most dangerous position for either guy in this fight. Because if Flick is the one on top, he's going to be able to threaten with arm bars and chokes. And he's really going to force Durden to be uncomfortable off of his back. So it comes down to, can Cody Durden get enough takedowns and at least get enough damage early on in the fight so to where Jimmy Flick's, I'll say, cardio advantage doesn't really kick into play in, late second, early third round. I'm saying Jimmy Flick is going to win by submission. Not my most confident pick. I do think this will be a really fun fight, though.
It is a really tough one to gauge because you look at Cody Durden's career that he had with NFC and the regional scene in the U.S. Southeast. Good career. I mean, in one night, he won a boxing fight, he won a kickboxing fight, and he won an MMA
Which
fight.
Is wild.
It is wild, and he can be a jack of all trades. I just really worry, what's the ceiling with Cody Durden? He had a really good fight against Chris Gutierrez. Now we're popping down to 125, where we're 0-1 in our career, and we have 13 pro fights. Why? Like, it's just, maybe it's a path of least resistance to get to the top, and this is the perfect fight for him to take. And you know what? I'd be somewhat in agreement. I think you fight a guy like Jimmy Flick that has 20 pro fights, all of them but one on the regional scene, or call Dana White's Contender Series, whatever you want. Maybe all 20 on the regional scene. And he's had good results. The one thing that I worry about for Jimmy Flick going forward, 4 of his total losses are by knockout. That's not a great sign. I really don't love the stand-up that he has. Now, in the Nate Smith fight, yeah, he looked good. He looked really good. He was throwing those nice hooks. He was closing distance well. And when he needed to, he could slap that calf kick, and it was hot and heavy. It was very well timed, too. He caught Smith almost flat-footed at times, and that's when those calf kicks really do most of their damage. And he switched his stance really well, too. I just don't know if he's going to have the time to do it against a guy like Durden that's really trying to close that gap at all points.
No, all those points are really fair, and I do like what you brought up. Flick and Durden will have to make some adjustments to their styles if they do plan on staying at the flyweight division, because this isn't the flyweight division from 2015 where there wasn't a lot of guys who could go out there and get the knockout. Right now at flyweight, Figueiredo can knock you out, Pantoja can knock you out, Askarov hits really hard. Like, there's so many good finishers at this weight class who aren't going to fall for the, kind of one-trick pony-ish if you don't get taken down by Jimmy Flick, or if Cody Durden can't take you down. Those upper elite guys are going to kind of have their way with both these guys, so I will be interested to see both careers moving forward, but yeah, I still have Flick.
And I mean, to offer up the final pick, because I've tried to go both ways with it, I do like Jimmy Flick ever so slightly in this fight. Again, he's going to be fishing for submissions constantly. Cody Durden, again, with that forward pressure, maybe looking for the takedowns. Now, is he going to be able to be taken down? Will Jimmy Flick be able to inflict the takedown on him? I don't totally know that one, but again, in those clinch positions, definitely dangerous. Cody Durden could certainly catch Jimmy Flick with a dirty, nasty shot. We've seen it in his fights as well. But I'm leaning ever so slightly to Flick. I do not like these odds. The fact that Flick opened an average minus 222, he hasn't fought the right level of competition to the way where, you get 20 pro fights. I would expect some of those wins to be some big names. There are none. The losses are to bigger regional names, but the wins aren't. So I kind of worry about that a little bit, where Cody Durden faced that good competition. Again, now you're playing MMA math because Flick lost to Gutierrez by finish in the third round. Durden, had a draw and had an incredibly competitive first round. So it is a tough one to call. I could certainly see people going either way. The Tapology voters going with Flick. The odds going with Flick. We're both going with Flick.
Ever so slightly.
Probably one of the least confident picks on the card, but I am really looking forward to this fight, Matt, because, hey, sky's the limit. You never know, especially in this flyweight division. So we're both going with Jimmy Flick in this fight to get the win. Really looking forward to this card. We have an impromptu main event between Marvin Vettori and Jack Hermanson. You're not going to want to miss that, so keep it locked in with Fight Night Picks, Matt. As we always say, let's get into it.